Hi to everybody and their neighbor. Welcome back to Gear and Gigs. I'm your host, Jet Stone. So glad you could stop by today. It is a super special day here in the studio. We have visiting virtually, of course, with us, Nick Bernstein. You've seen him on James Corden. You've heard the name. Perhaps you've seen him on a horse. He's the most famous reluctant star in the world, I think, right now. And we are so fortunate to have gotten him to come on the show. Nick, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the introduction.
Can I call you Nick? Is that okay? Or should I call you Mr. Bernstein because you're pretty important?
Nick is perfectly fine. Yeah, reluctant is a great adjective to use to describe me and my journey so far.
The thing that I've noticed from watching the show and then watching your appearance come on through the pandemic and all the changes is that you are such a team player. You're so willing to give of yourself for the bit, for the team, for the show, for the advertisers, for the corporation, whatever. I've never seen somebody that's so willing to do that with a smile on their face and, clear reluctance sometimes, but yet I'll do it anyway. Not a lot of fear. You're willing to just dive in. And I got to say, that's to be admired. That is really something special.
Oh, that's really nice of you to say. Thanks. I think it was pretty easy at first to have that attitude because when I started coming onto the show, it was still at the time when we didn't have an audience. And so we were in a room in the studio, if people haven't seen it, where James's audience was just made up of people who work on the staff. And when I got the okay to be part of that, you're just hanging out with friends for up to 80 minutes, 90 minutes. And the first half of that is just people joking with each other like they would have during like rehearsals in the before times, or some maybe in the coffee room or wherever we happen to be just hanging out. And obviously, we've all known each other for a pretty long time and we have good rapport, but that somehow unbelievably translated into television. And so, I don't know, I think I kind of grew up just always liking anything that was a little bit behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. And when you got to see those people who somehow have to do with the show, whatever that job might have been, and they are now all of a sudden part of the show, I always found that really fun. So I try to keep that in mind with whatever they ask me to do, whether it's a question that I am sometimes uncomfortable answering, or if it goes beyond that, and sometimes they're putting me in sort of larger sketches every once in a while, which I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Do you think that going back in late night history, do you think, I'm trying to think, Carson didn't do that a lot, but it seems like Letterman started doing that, bringing out some of the writers occasionally to sit or to do a bit or whatever. And some of them went on to be stars in their own right, of course, but yeah. You guys have done that to a whole different level. I mean, now, we know so many of the crew out there. Are they comfortable with that? Are they reluctant about it? Or is it kind of a mix? Or
I would say almost everybody who is semi-regularly been featured, with the exception of maybe Scott, the camera person, are all pretty game for it.
Really? I mean, I think even
Susan's pretty happy with it. Yeah. Susan's pretty into it. She gets a kick out of it. I mean, Susan, let's not forget what she was in a Starbucks integration with all of us. I think Scotty is the one who's a little more shy than the rest, but even when he's on, he's fine with it. I think we kind of all sort of jump into this type of industry, not because we all want to be in front of the camera, but we all at least can acknowledge and accept that we know what that's like. We can see what it's like, and we can take part without having too much reluctance.
So that begs two questions for me. One, since everybody's wearing masks, or at least for the most part in this time period where they've become famous adjacent, we'll say. Uh-huh. Do you think the masks in some way help them go from I'm behind the scenes person to now I'm on camera, because you can't always see their expression, you just get to see their eyes, like Susan, for instance. I get the
Mhm.
feeling she likes being behind the mask for a lot of her expression, or choice to not make one, so to speak, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, even I feel like even before maybe it was during the pandemic, they did a bit
It's hard to remember
with
before
Susan.
the pandemic. It's just, it's been going forever, but anyway.
They had a bit where people had to guess whether or not uh they come up with a phrase or just a concept like um that may or may not be something Susan had done in her past.
Sure.
And then you had to guess, and if you guessed correctly, you got this autograph photo of her. Um, Now I'm actually maybe that did come from the pandemic. Maybe that happened on account of the pandemic, but clearly she was like into it. And at one point in her life, she had done some acting. So I don't
Oh,
think that um, specifically, I guess you'd have to ask her, but I don't think that the mask or no mask, it didn't really affect her specifically. Maybe some of us were have a little bit more freedom because of a covering. But I actually, in some ways, think because we have to wear masks all the time, it's just it's just like basically a piece of clothing at this point. It's just like part of our what we wear. So sometimes for better or worse, when it came to me before the KN95s, but like I had gotten in trouble for some of the type of masks that I've been wearing.
I wouldn't say
Um,
that trouble's the right word, but I've garnered some perhaps unwanted attention.
Unwarranted, yeah, unwanted, and I would say unwarranted attention.
Roasting perhaps might be the term
Significant, yes. There was a lot of comments on it. Yes.
I promised Kelsey that I would not say a word about that. So even though I have many things bubbling up I'd like to say, I
Uh-huh.
won't. I won't. Because
Uh-huh.
I feel like you've abused yourself enough of that. You've taken it. You've taken all the punches. You've been really good about it. And in particular, of course, the infamous one, it being a gift coming from a good place with good memories of the horse racing and whatnot. To me, I couldn't even mock that. As soon as I'd found out that that's where it came from, I would have to pull off and make fun of you for something else. But it wouldn't have been that. But I'm a horse racing fan too. I'm a big horse racing guy. I
Oh,
love
cool.
Santa Anita. I know that that's
Yeah.
where they had your big day. And I used to work for a publishing company right out there. So I used to go to Santa Anita, and it's just such a beautiful track, such a gorgeous place.
Yeah, it's great. It's kind of fun. Like, of all the things that could have led to, I am now friendly with several people who work in the horse racing industry.
Good.
And that's become that's been really nice on some of these bigger days.
And that's
Sometimes
not
they'll
a
invite
culture
you
it's
over.
easy to break into. Otherwise, they're
Yeah.
pretty clicky about that whole thing.
Yeah,
So that's
they're a tight knit group, but yeah, we had a great. They treated us really well when we had our day at Santa Anita, and
you rode lava, man. I
that's
mean,
right,
that's
that's right.
Seattle Slews, the grandsire. I mean, that's like
It was a big
from
deal.
a horse racing guy, that's like, ooh, that's as good as you get. I mean,
It was really cool. I couldn't believe they let us do that. Yeah,
going all the way back to what was it? Boldnesian, the great grandsire who won the Santa Anita Derby, what, in '66? I mean,
it's
that's a
yeah, the
lineage. That's
legacy
a
is
serious
incredible.
lineage of winning horses. So when I saw
Yeah,
you on that, I'm like, oh man, can I make a wish? That's very that's very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Um, I won't spend too much time on the picture of you on the horse, but I would like to ask: is the picture still up? The infamous lobby
it is
picture,
still
is
up.
it still
It's
up?
still up. I mean, the
And still
picture.
no clue to the mystery, huh?
They did eventually. So when it went up, I had no idea that it was going up. They gave me a lie detector test, as you know, uh, because they didn't believe that I didn't know, or that they thought somehow
The
that
lie
I
detector,
just
and yeah.
created this thing and then put it up on the wall. Which, by the way, I'm sure that they've mentioned it, but that wall is chock full of just James with the largest stars in the world. So it is, him with LeBron James or Bruno Mars or Lady Gaga or Adele or you name it, and that's what it is. It's these epic moments from the show, and then me wearing this jockey outfit on the
On the
plastic
Mount
horse.
Rushmore of famous people, here you are.
It's and so I don't know if sometimes it fades into the background. I'm sure for most people it does, but anyone who looks up at that point and is like, wow, what is that?
Dude, the
Why is that
plastic
there?
horse's family's been drinking off that for 6 months. I mean, really, that's a big to do for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that eventually, I think it was my bosses that ended up, they were the ones who put that up and they thought it was funny.
That
Because
is
they took
pretty
a
cool.
picture with it on, I hadn't, I'm going into the office now and but my office is not on the same lot as almost everybody else who works with me on the studio and network side. They're on a different campus.
That's
And most
because
of
if I
them,
remember correctly, you actually asked specifically to be on the campus of your show for your office, which I
yeah,
think when I heard that, I'm like, this guy, team player, once again, the checking the big team player box again, over and over. But it's genius. That's genius. It's
yeah,
it says
thank you.
sends the right signal both directions. And that's what if there's one thing that I have seen about you, and I've done a lot of jobs. I've hired and fired a zillion people in my life, and so I'm always kind of evaluating. I have a psych degree, so I'm always evaluating people along these lines. It's like this guy plays the middle ground, but he's not playing. He holds this middle ground, and it shifts wherever it is. But he knows how to create a win-win every time. And even if he has to suffer a little bit to do it, he does it and then takes the bigger win for himself. To me, that's the guy you always want. I mean, I actually put together a list of
Wow.
traits that I've seen about you. And I'm not trying to blow smoke up your dress in any way, but this is one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because within just a few exposures to you, I'm like, oh man, I like this guy. He is cool. I mean, the
Thanks.
long hair is great. I like the long
Yeah,
hair.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm all for that. But it's like you're respectful. You're appreciative of others, but also your own position. I mean, you're appreciating all the little perks of this whole little escapade that may end any day. But you're appreciative of it. You're thoughtful. You're generous. You give to others. I've watched some podcasts where you've talked about going back to the summer camps that you used to attend as a kid and being a counselor, and then going back and helping with their skits and things. It's like, look at him giving. He's tactful. He's like the Henry Kissinger, the voice of reason in the room. He shows you that he understands everybody's side, but then he boils it down to these salient decision points that are easy for everybody to swallow and handle and deal with. I mean, intelligent, obviously, but diligent and just you just seem to see things all the way through. Now, I don't know, you may be a complete ball dropper in real life and you're just faking it
That's
great,
right.
but
Spent
it
2 years.
comes across like that. And when I look at your incredibly long history with an arc that just keeps doing this, pardon my mic hitting, it's impressive. I mean, did you ever think when you started out as a page at NBC that you would, be a senior VP of late night programming someday?
I definitely did. I mean, thank you first of all for that was a very lovely things to say. I'm happy to know that that comes across. I don't know. You know what? When I started all I knew is that I wanted to work in television. That was the thing that I wanted the most, and the idea that I could have some impact on whatever shows I got to work on or work with. That was the goal. So I tried not to think too much about what those next steps would be. I didn't care, still don't care clearly that much about, titles, how to get there fast. I tried to realize pretty early on that like, if I could be in a situation where I could learn a lot, that was my number one priority. If I could work on or with people that I really admire and shows that I particularly like, that was going to make work feel less like work. And then when I was, it sounds like you know quite a lot about my background, but my
Well, I have
first
that diligence thing too, so I gotta
I
put in
appreciate it. It's nice to be able to jump to that step. But my first job coming out of the Page program, getting a chance to work in the late night department, that was still at a time where I was young enough to not necessarily know, is this a path that I want to take? Do I want to work in an office, work as an executive, potentially, if I'm lucky enough to continue moving up? But I knew that the shows that my boss, Rick, worked on were all the shows that I loved watching as a fan, wanted to learn more about. And so it didn't take long for me to recognize and realize if I really like this, I think I could make a career in this field in late night. And
I think you
so
might.
even and it might work out, yeah. It might work out. So I mean, basically like jumping to about 7 years ago, a little over 7 years ago when I got a chance to come to CBS, I had known by that point how much fun it was to help develop new shows and new late night shows specifically, and how exciting it is when somebody is able to be introduced to this world, get their voice out, have a point of view that is interesting and important. And I didn't know James particularly well before I started working on the show, but I'd seen enough that he'd done just online in clips from whether it was hosting the British version of the Grammys or a couple of documentaries that he'd done, just the breadth of knowledge and interest that he had. And that was always the thing that was exciting for me. And I had had a little bit of experience then, both working as an executive and working as a producer. So one of the reasons that I wanted to have my office and at the same campus as the Late Late Show productions was it's so hard to be a part of something if you're not there all the time, because there's that 1 hour a day or so that they're taping the show is only a small portion of what goes into making that show. So I thought, if I can be of help, if they need something from me, I need to be there and be around. And consequently and subsequently, if my bosses who work at the network or the studio need something from me, it's going to be about that show. So I'm going to be accessible to them, but I will have more information to give them if I'm there all the time. And they understood that, and they were really cool about knowing what they didn't know about late night, and trusting me that I could help sort of usher in this next generation, which basically was, from a creative standpoint, that's really James and Ben and Rob and Ian, like a lot of the people that you know and see on the show. Many of them were there at the start. James Longman, and it's a lot of it is giving them the opportunities to do the things they want to do. And I knew well enough there that, like, not every executive is like this, not every producer is like this, but just letting them experiment a little bit. That's one of the joys I have about working in late night and watching late night. It's a little bit of discovery is really exciting.
Once you cross that midnight line, you can have a lot more fun, can't you?
That's the hope. Yeah. You don't want to
Saturday
be
Night
bored.
Live, I know, used to do that kind of stuff too. You'd wait around to the end of the skits, and they got way wackier and
Yeah,
more fun,
everybody-
and experimental. And sometimes they didn't land, but when they did, it was wow.
Yeah, well, and even one of the cool things that I got to do at NBC early on, there was a window of time where there wasn't a 1:30 a.m. show. There is not a 1:30 a.m. show now, but for a while it was, if you remember, it was later with Bob Costas, and then that transitioned to Greg Kinnear, just a couple of other hosts, and then there was a window about, I don't know, 6 or 9 months where there was no last call, no later, and Last Call with Preston Daly hadn't started yet. They were running repeats of SCTV.
And here I was, wide open. Nobody's tapping me.
I mean,
wake
just
anyway.
that window. If only we'd known each other 22 years ago.
I know, right?
And so we were running these half-hour repeats of SCTV, and I'd known SCTV and watched it a little bit, but I was very young when that was originally on. And to get a chance to watch that again at 1:30 in the morning, and I would watch all the episodes, and
which is the best time to watch SCTV.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It really was. I got all the jokes this time around. They did a lot of that behind the scenes, but it was all a goof, because it was the construct was, it's a fake network, it's a fake station, and everybody who works there also is somehow like a host of one of those other shows. And I have just always been enamored with that show and what they did and all the ways they weaved storylines through, which you just didn't see in comedy, and still you rarely see. Like Nick Kroll did it a little bit on his Comedy Central show, where people could pop up in any number of various shows. And I can only assume, I don't know him very well, I can only assume that he had some of that SCTV tip of the hat for that show. But I think that's the other reason why I still find it really fun when they can, peek behind the curtain and see whoever is helping to make these shows, whether it's the real thing or the construct.
I can't tell you how many times I've watched the monologue, which calling it a monologue seems a disservice to monologue. It's not so much a monologue
Not
anymore. It's
anymore.
kind of
Yeah.
a prologue. But to me, that's the meat of the show. I mean, the guests are great and sometimes they're fascinating, but there's a lot of times where I really don't care who the guest is. I just want to see you guys interact. I want to see fins up. I want to see, CC get a hard time or somebody reluctantly pull down their mask because now they've been asked a difficult question about their weekend or, and
Yeah.
you feel like you know these people, and that inside joke culture, I think, is one of the big strengths. I mean, that's Letterman once again was a guy who really pulled out a lot of that sense of you're in it with us on the inside jokes, and we're being completely irreverent, but hey, you get this, right? We're in this together.
Yeah.
And some shows are not like that. They're just shows. They're variety shows. They're talk shows. They're done in a show format, and they kind of keep to that show ethic, we'll call it. But the breaking down of that fourth wall and smashing it to bits and crawling right next to me on my couch and talking to me is the thing that has set that show apart for me. And you are kind of a symptom of that. I mean, you got roped into that because of that culture. And that was one of the things that I liked about seeing you on there. It's like, okay, they talk about him growing his hair. So now there's a question about why he wants to grow his hair. So now we've got to delve into his personality. Well, now we're getting some background. Well, next thing you know, we're zooming with your family at home. And
Yeah.
it's like, wait a minute. This guy has let us in. And that openness, that culture of honesty, it lends a sense of like these people trust each other.
Yeah.
Is that true? Is that what's really going on?
I think you've captured it very, very well. I so once again, before all of this happened, I had a pretty good idea of what's happening in every act of the show. I'll read the scripts. I know what the monologue jokes are. If there was an issue with sales or whatever, I would usually be looped in on those things.
Don't mention the cruise.
and so that was sort of a tried and true, that if you want to call it late show ethics, that is, there's a certain way these shows are made, and successfully you bump against that a little bit and try to make it your own, but it's still within the confines of however those shows are created.
We have a desk, we have guests, we have chairs, we have a band,
Yeah.
we have an audience.
Yeah, and I think the particularly successful people are the ones who ultimately eventually end up throwing that playbook away. Oftentimes that happens early on in a show. And so the malleability is really important, I think. And for any of these shows, you have to grow. You have to change as people grow older. They change. As shows grow older, they change. For James to get so comfortable and really generous in giving his show over often to all of these people who are working for him and with him. I've never seen anything like that before. And he really gets a kick out of it. And if he didn't, he wouldn't be doing it. And so, you can absolutely credit the Lettermans, and Conan's done that before. And, with people like Jordan Schlansky, who's became a regular. He did it with Jeff Ross, who's his producer. I know that show a little bit better because I used to work with them, but like Letterman as well. Like it was always fun whether it was Biff or Tony or Howard Stern. Obviously, has done it to incredible effect on the radio, and
that's a good example. Yeah,
we know. I think all of us have reverence for all of those shows as well, and so you can't just recreate that vibe. It has to be, like you said, organic and come from within. And so I'm not sure we could do the show we're doing now if we had started that way. But it is incredible to want to do that show now based on where we started and how much different it was then than it is now. And both shows were great. I love being in the control room and watching things develop, whether it was organically on the couch with guests or if it was just a really well-constructed sketch that Louis did or Olivia even yesterday did. That's really fun. to watch and watch an audience discover that and get joy out of sketch. But it is also fun when things are just happening on the floor and we're all just part of it. And that happened every once in a while on the old version of the show. There was a day that
way back then.
there was a day where like Kumail Nanjiani and Dan Levy were guests on an episode, and there was a joke that they wouldn't answer any of James's questions until he paid off a bet to Steve Scalfati from the band that had happened in the previous act. And it was all joking, but they committed to it. So James had to leave to go find a checkbook to give Steve to pay Steve off. And so it was just Kumail and Dan chatting about. So one of them picked up the cards and was asking questions, and it was this like very freeform, fun, silly moment. And now we do stuff like that almost every day. And the editors take take some of the fat out of that moment, because we can go sometimes a half hour or longer in the studio. If you're a studio audience member at this point, you see even more of that than you do if you're watching it on TV or online. But I'm not sure you're necessarily missing anything, because they do a really good job of crafting the absolute like best, and they're giving us all quite a lot of television. I mean, that is, as you said, like it's at least a third of the episode these days, sometimes half.
It doesn't seem contrived. Some parts of any show do, and the nice thing about when you guys do something that seems put together ahead of time, it's like it was meant to. It's like you're supposed to know now that this was really put together. But the stuff that comes out naturally does not seem like it's full of artifice. It just seems like it's, like you said, like a bull session, like people just hanging out and talking about what happened to them, or what they think is funny at the moment, or even just their responses to what's going on in pop culture. And like you said, to give him credit, James is more than willing to ask anybody, hey, how was your weekend? Hey, I heard you did this. Hey, tell us about that. I heard a juicy detail. That's so cool that he's willing to toss the show to somebody and let them run with it for a while.
Oh yeah. And I think I still get the scripts. I still have a general idea of what's going to happen, but not nearly as much as I did before. And in some ways, that just helps keep the spontaneity going. I mean, they don't tell me a whole lot when it comes to whether James is going to ask me a question or throw to me. I mean, just this week, the name of my company changed from Viacom CBS to Paramount.
Right.
And I knew, I had an inkling that like this is a big enough deal as a story, and it's because we're on CBS, it's natural that it would come up. That if it does come up, he's probably going to ask me something about it. But I didn't know what he was going to ask me, and then I just had to come up with something on the fly, and then
that keeps
that turned into a
upper's
bit.
happy and the lower's happy. It's
well, that is
you tread that line so well though, because you have to do it right then. I mean, just right then. You can't go, hang on a minute, let me think about this, or pull out a prepared thing. You just do a very good job of that. I'm like, man, this guy ought to be in politics if politics wasn't such a cesspool of nonsense, because you get that. You know how to negotiate. You're the Kissinger in the room, man. You get it.
I try my hardest to play along and also not get in too much trouble, which fortunately, I know that my direct bosses and like the heads of departments seem to enjoy what's happening on the show, and don't mind anything that I've said so far. I've been doing this now for 10 months or so, since May. And only once did I get in some real hot water for something, and
even ask you what that is. I won't ask you.
Well, listen, I'm sure it was cruise related. It was certainly sales related, but it was so early on that I think that everybody sort of figured out what was good. And I mean, to the point that one of the things that tickles me the most is a few months ago, we pitched an idea to, we do integrations as has been talked about many times. As you're drinking a Pepsi.
I'm sorry, is that a bad? It's my show. I can do that. Hang
Yeah,
on, I'm
you can
not
do that.
sponsored.
That's not a problem for me. But we had a bit where Capital One wanted to do an integration with us, and we pitched an idea
The
that
Christmas thing?
say that again.
Is that the Christmas thing or is that Starbucks?
It happened at Christmas time, but the Christmas one of the holiday things that was like a daydream, a holiday dream was Starbucks.
Okay, that's the one. My apologies.
Oh, it's okay. The other one, the thing that we pitched to Capital One is, well, we can't travel the show right now. That is sort of the thing that everybody is likes to do, is try to get a paid integration during one of these weeks where we travel somewhere or James goes somewhere. And so we were like, but look at the monologue and look at what we do in the monologue. And we said, like James always asks me about brands. Can we say it? Can we say something? And what if this time he mentions Cap One and he asks me if we can talk about Cap One and I say yes. And then I'm the one who has to spout out all the information about Cap One and the APR and all the rewards. And they said yes. And so that was the one time where I was like, I have to know
lines, man. You had lines. Were you teleprompter or did you memorize them?
I had a prompter, but I did memorize it.
Good for you. Good for
and
you.
But that was to me one of the more exciting things that have happened, because this organic thing that we've all done is now well known enough in the space where we make money that we can do something fun that also feels like it's part of our show. Mm-hmm. That they're making a joke off of a joke that's an inside joke, and reaping the rewards from it, because people aren't slamming, oh my gosh, this looks like, why did they do this? Or the sellouts or whatever, like the 90s terms might have been on that. This was a really like, oh no, we figured out a way to do this. And so that was a fun one.
When you can take the cheese and make a pizza rather than just making it cheesy, that's good. You guys have managed to do that. We've got some things like that on our show, especially on our audio podcast. One of our hosts has got a real pet peeve about the term decimate, because decimate actually means to reduce by 10%. It's an old Roman term that's how they would punish their troops, is they would come in and kill 1 in 10 of them as a motivation for the other 90%, which I'm sure probably worked pretty well, but I don't recommend it as a something for you guys to try. But whenever anybody uses decimate to mean, completely wipe out, which is kind of the common terminology now,
right,
he gets very bent out of shape. So we've turned that into a thing now. If anybody ever says that or whatever, it becomes this pet peeve. We have pet peeve music that plays, and so I can appreciate that very much. That's very cool.
It's like how everybody uses literally now, however they want to.
Thank you. Yes, that's one of my pet peeves. Thank you. I knew I liked you, man. I knew. So I got to ask you, since you got the hair, are you a musician of any kind? I know you followed music as a kid and stuff. You were really into the charts and the Casey Kasems of the world, like the rest of us who got up on Sunday mornings. Are you a musician, or were you a player of any kind? Or
I never learned an instrument, unfortunately. When I was growing up, I used to sing in like school choirs, and
cool.
And I was pretty serious about it through high school. So I would like we had things like chamber singers, and we had all-state chorus that I would do that. I did that through my senior year, and then I kind of put it away. I think I burned out on it a little bit. But I always enjoyed singing, but never thought of it as something that I wanted to sort of pursue in any way. I just enjoyed it.
And now your PR department's going, oh, Nick likes to sing. Oh man, James, we had no idea. We got a whole new thing. So I'm so sorry that came
okay. But I never I didn't learn anything, and I kind of and I have young kids now who also haven't learned instruments, and I always think like that's something that I really wish we'd done a little bit, because I think it's a lifetime of enjoyment.
It's, well, big time musician guy, right? That's my
Yeah.
whole life. So I highly recommend it for so many reasons that actually most of which you would probably appreciate because you're the kind of guy who would. It's um it's the greatest thing I've ever done in my life other
Mm.
than have a kid is learn music because it just like you like opening up the doors to entertainment and peeking behind the curtains and seeing how it's all done. That's how I feel every time I listen to anybody play any song because I can play bass and drums and keys and guitar and I can sing and I can write and I can produce. So there's no mystery for me. I can just hear how it's done and enjoy the efforts at the different levels and the cohesiveness and all that sort of stuff. So as an understanding of the world, let alone the selfish enjoyment of just playing or the communal aspect of playing with musicians and that kind of stuff, it's it's a really freeing thing in life to know how to do something in music. So I really do recommend just anything. Just try any instrument. Just mess with it. Even if you just mess with it a little bit, you'll be surprised how much you might get out of it. And
Yeah.
I will gladly offer free lessons to you at any time on any instrument and your
Oh,
kids
wow.
because I teach and I would be glad to do that because I love getting people excited about music and having them come back to me a couple years later and go, dude, that was the best thing I did. I just learned a new guitar way of thinking, a philosophy on how to improvise and how to learn the neck, right? And that's one of the things guitar players are always thinking about. And so since I've come up with this idea, I'm like, I've got to start sharing this with people. And the people that I've shared it with, which I can usually do in about 15 minutes if you're a player at all, they come back to me like, where were you all my life? This is the best thing. And they're
Oh,
so
wow.
empowered by that that just sends the hackles up on the back of my neck. I'm so jazzed about seeing that. It's,
Yeah.
it's seeing that come back around. It's like comedy. I enjoy comedy because it's this circle where you
Yeah.
give and you get and you give and you get and people think the comedians are not getting as much as the audience and they're getting more than the audience. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just such a great thing to get a laugh. So that communal thing in music, and I can tell you're probably into the community of comedy and theater and that sort of stuff. I think you'd really like it.
Yeah, I bet. I watch a lot of music documentaries, which
Hmm.
some of the more recent ones that I've seen, which my guess is that you also watch your fair share. There was one that HBO did on the Bee Gees
Oh
last
yeah.
year, and it was, the story of it was interesting, but they took it. There was a moment in that where they were in the studio and they were showing specifically how they created Staying Alive,
Hmm.
when the bass lick and playing just the sort of individual parts
The bass lick,
of that song. Yeah.
the James
Um,
Corden bass lick.
that's right. Yeah, that's exactly. I assume that's how he played it. Um, and that is like watching that type of magic and having someone who really knows what they're doing. I saw it, like the Amy Winehouse documentary did something similar. Um, I think the guy from Garbage who produced Nevermind, Nirvana's Nevermind, did something similar where they went in and they just were playing each individual part of the song and then would bring them together. And I think people sort of have slowly discovered how much the public is interested in that creation aspect of music as much as whatever the background of the people who made it were. So I can understand the enjoyment. Like, I don't spend all that much time deconstructing comedy necessarily. I prefer being in the moment and watching it unfold and finding something exciting that I hadn't seen before. Um, that's the most exciting part to me. But on the music end, I love seeing that deconstruction.
Interesting. Yeah. I guess being one of the cooks, I don't think often that people would find that as fascinating, but you're right. There's been a lot of shows recently about that, and they do seem to be pretty popular. I guess it can't all be musicians just watching. I mean, they did Steely Dan Asia, a breakdown of that where they're sitting at the console, rolling up individual tracks. For me,
Yeah.
that's the thing is like you can hear the warts on the track. Now I can hear, oh, listen to the strings. Oh, there was a squeak there. I don't remember
Yeah.
that.
Uh,
That's very cool stuff.
Even there's a Kenny G documentary where they spend a lot of time where he goes, whether I think you get so enamored with technology and what you can do with technology. And he would go in and change one note and just tweak one note and redo it. And so that one song or one riff on a song that he was playing, I don't know sax that well, but it was like 15 different takes that they somehow turned into a single song. And I was like, I never really think about it that way, because I always think, I don't know, maybe watching old movies or something, that you got to do it every time till you get that one take. And that's the one take that is the take. And that is not the way the music's made necessarily.
Not anymore. No, with the advent of all the digital stuff and being able to see what's going on, to see the actual waveforms on the screen has changed everything. So yeah, I regularly, as I record albums for people, I'll composite their solos. I'll have them do 10 or 15 takes where they're going to make lots of bad notes because they're free. I want that improvisational, on the ragged edge, don't know what you're going to do, and you're not concerned about flubbing because you know that'll be taken out, like editing out of a bad conversation at the beginning of the show. You're not worried about saying something bad because they pulled. But then you can craft this thing where you might take one note from a solo and pull it up here, and that suddenly changes everything. And you can't tell. There's no way to tell after the fact.
Yeah.
It's just,
Well, I mean, shockingly, that is even to bring it back to the Late Show, that's our act one. Yeah. That freedom, you can say what you want. They're going to protect you. If something doesn't fire on all cylinders, that joke probably doesn't make it in. That line doesn't make it into the show. So it does allow for more natural conversation to happen and more spontaneity to happen. And
that's what people want to see.
Great.
They want to see you just about to lose control, right? They want to see how hard can he ride this line. That's why we like to watch race car drivers, right? Because we know that they're just constantly on that ragged edge, just about to wipe out or quit. And they hold the line, and that's you right now. That's what you do. That's
I will say that. I mean, thanks. One of the things that I give a little bit of credit to places like YouTube for bringing, and podcasts also for bringing, is there is an honesty and a rawness and a realism that came from people who figured out and discovered their voices in these new formats that laid out both something that was harder to see and harder to find on other television and or films that weren't documentaries, that was just sort of natural comedy or talk format. And you could see how successful that could be. And so I think it did allow for a little bit of honesty and a little more, I think, just willingness to put yourself out there on television that's really been to the benefit of both these newer hosts and I think the viewers who responded to it.
I agree. Now, because we are primarily a music program, I want to kind of bring it back to bands a little bit, because I know you, and we should maybe tell everybody real quick that all the shows you've worked on, because you started way back at NBC, and you've worked with Jimmy Fallon, you've worked with Conan, obviously, you worked with Jay Leno, you've worked with, you did the Pete Holmes show, you're the producer and showrunner, I guess, of that one, right? That must have been pretty exciting. So you've got a big history of doing talk shows, entertainment shows, and interfacing with tons of bands, house bands, as well as acts that come on. So I know that a lot of our viewers are going to have questions about what it might be like either to be in the house band, right? Because that's a dream gig, or to be an act that's been booked on a big show like yours. So let's talk about the being booked on sort of a situation. So let's say your band gets booked on the show. Did they reach out to you, or did you reach out to them, or could it have happened either way?
I would say that 99% of the
personally
time,
necessarily.
that's the show. 99% of the time, it's the show that's reaching out to the bands.
Okay.
That there might be instances where the talent executives or the music execs have relationships with certain managers or agents, and they said, if you like this person, you should check out this new band or whoever it is. There's quite a few people on various staffs who go out and see live music on the regular and come back and say, I think this band's ready. There are also quite a lot of there's quite a lot of I think excitement when you're able to book a band for their late night debut. And so, you know, it's rare that someone discovers a band for the first time because they've seen them on television. I think there's so much access to bands and music now that there's quite a lot of discovery that happens in advance of that. Whereas, you know, certainly through the 90s, I think it's the first time you might see somebody who maybe you've heard on the radio would be on one of these talk shows, or maybe Saturday Night Live. I think
another show you worked on. I'm sorry, I should have
another, yeah, that I worked for them also. But it's always really exciting. I mean, we just had bands called the Linda Lindas that were on the show, and they are a rock band based in LA who's they're
13,
all
15, 16, 17.
they're all girls. The oldest is 17. Yeah. And it's wild. They were great. And there was like
wow.
Everybody was excited. They were making their debut on television with us, but they haven't been on television very often. And it was just a blast. Like, their energy was great. The enthusiasm was great. It is really exciting also for us to have live music back in the studio, which has happened. I'd say we're still, I don't know, 60-40 live to somebody pre-taped that delivers an original performance to us. But it's been great. I mean, and one of the other things that is particularly exciting on all these shows is when we're able to do like a week of concerts. We had Coldplay that played for a week, and they played all new songs. Yep, he did a week. When back in the at the Leno Tonight Show, they had live outdoor performances. So they'd set up they'd set up the band in our parking lot, and so we could have, I don't know, 500 people, 1,000 people watch that. Jimmy Kimmel does it out on Hollywood Boulevard.
Right.
Conan's done it before. But all of those were really fun. Jimmy Fallon did a really cool one where it was like, I don't know who the band was, but they did one, not when I was working there, after I'd left. They were like on a proscenium where overlooking, I think, Fifth Avenue. So they put the band outside.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
That was really cool.
Yeah, very cool.
So anytime someone gets to do something a little different, I think that's always really exciting. And now I think the goal for a lot of these bands, and we pride ourselves on it, you know, like Josie Cliff and Tim, the director, and everybody involved in lighting, and like trying to make that performance unique to us and look different. And I think we pride ourselves on the way that we showcase the band aesthetically as well as how they sound.
Okay, so that begs two questions for me. One, the parcels this week, right? Just
Yeah.
the parcels show. And I've never seen the parcels before. I really don't know much about them. Is it wrong for me to have BG flashbacks as they're playing? Is that wrong, or is that just I'm too old? Because I'm, you know, the fashion, the beats, everything they were doing, and their willingness to be that over the top 70s looking fashion that a lot of people are not willing to do, especially guys. I'm like, oh, okay, these guys are like into the image. This is cool.
Yeah.
But then I noticed, because I do cinematography and video, I'm like looking at this going, okay, somebody's got a star filter on here. So every little sequin is popping like crazy. So who makes that decision to go, yeah, we're going to put that filter on there. Yeah, we're going to light it this way. Who does that?
Well, I think it's a combination of people. I mean, it's Josie Cliff, who's a co-EP of the show and works with all of the bands. Tim Mancinelli, who's the director. Casey, who does lighting. They have a real aesthetic for it. And a lot of that comes from also Ben Winston, who's both the EP and showrunner, one of the two showrunners of the show, but he also is a director. So he came from directing. He directed One Direction music videos in the 2010s, and then he directed the Friends reunion, and produced that. And so his eye is unlike anyone I've seen in for any of these late night shows. It's and particularly when it comes to music, he really knows how to get the best out of a musician and make them look unlike they would on any other show. So
I would agree. I would definitely agree. When I
I
think
mean,
of
that's
those
why I
bands
like,
that have appeared on your show, they have an iconic presence the way you guys have featured them.
yeah,
Not always when they've done it on their own, but when they're in the studio, it's like, man, you guys have. It's like you keep going all out for them, but differently for each one. You know.
yeah, they really do. They put themselves, they put a lot of time into it, and really want every single performance to feel special. And I think they pull it off in a really nice way.
I do too.
Um,
It seems
it's
like you're
a
behind the band. You
yeah,
know, like you're
and
really
that
pulling for them, and that's cool from a band
uh,
standpoint. Very cool.
yeah, and I mean, Parcels particularly also, I like, we were all like this was great. It sounded great. It looked so cool.
It did look really good.
And I didn't know them either. And I the first band I thought of, fairly or unfairly, like first, the band Bread was the one that came to mind for me.
Wow.
And
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
maybe
I can
America a little bit.
I can see him on the was it the bandstand or something with that same kind of thing. Yeah, totally.
And
That was
I don't know where they got, like, what their uh what what they thought of, or who they were looking to in order to, like, help them to come up with their look for the show, or maybe this is what their look is for their future tour also. But it had to come from that sort of similar thing. It looked like they could have been straight out of, like, the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
it really did. So you guys don't coordinate the band's wardrobe then?
I don't know if we had a coordination specifically when it came to Parcels. I mean, clearly they showed us what, like, they would have told us what they were going to look like and what they were going to wear, and even as they were rehearsing, um, just knowing what that was going to look like so they could adjust and enhance accordingly. But um, but uh, but yeah, I that is a level of production that I don't have a whole lot of involvement in on a day-to-day basis.
Well, it's nice you have people you can trust to do such a good job on
Yeah,
that because it really is very well done. So
yeah.
when they do things like the crosswalk concerts, right?
Mhm.
Are, are you coordinating with the city on that? I mean,
Yeah, that is, there is, so we have an entire field team, that their job is to prep for anytime we leave the studio. So
very
whether that
organized.
is, yeah, so I mean, that's technically like across the street from our studio. That crosswalk is
Oh wow, I
directly
wondered.
leads into Television City,
Huh?
where we work. But we still have to coordinate with LA, city, police. Um, they, but we've been doing it now for so long that the conversation and there's a bit of shorthand at this point.
10 p.m. Ariana Grande. We'll be there. Bye.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so like those have all worked out really well. And sometimes, not sometimes, every time we've done a crosswalk concert, which is not that often, but we just did one with BTS, we did one with Harry Styles. Uh those are definitely, I'm not sure if we've
The
done
Lion King,
for a
right?
third.
Wasn't the Lion King show or something
Well,
like
yeah,
that?
the crosswalk, the musicals are also big and in the same space, but when it is concert specific, so it is the band coming out and performing songs in the crosswalk before they run back out, that creates this enormous overflow of onlookers and fans that are, I wouldn't say encouraged to necessarily be there, but there's also, because they can't, like, distract actual traffic. That is real. Those are real people that are trying to come through there, and so we can't stop the flow of traffic. Um, but it is cool when you get, like, that amount of fandom coming to see something you're doing that is so silly,
Very silly.
but they're
It's
still
awesome
performing
silly.
their songs.
It's
So
it's it's like stupid human tricks. It's awesomely silly. It's just the thing you're going to talk about the next day
yeah,
for sure. Because that isn't that really the big thing that shows like yours, all the shows you've worked on do is they bring this lens onto real life that's not a regular lens,
Mhm.
right? Either it's super meta and it makes you look at life objectively, or it's mocking and taking things, as James would say, taking the piss out of something, right? Taking it off the pedestal, knocking it around, taking anything sacred and going, well, does it have to be? You know, it's a time-honored tradition in comedy, but you have like made a career of working for people who really do that a lot, and you don't seem like an instigator. You're not an annoying, prodding type of guy, I don't think. So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so I think what you like is the vicarious release of this mocking and analyzing of the Seinfeldian analyzing of life from a seat on the sidelines where you can provide the commentary, but I don't have to get caught up in that ruckus. I can just let you guys do that. But hey, can I
I
chip
think
in
that's
over
fair.
here? And by the way, am I right? Is that kind of a thing?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that I think uh not being a part of it and watching it happening and uh being just slightly removed from the intensity of having worked on it, having rewritten something, having put the
Mm,
beats together, talking to, if it's something like a carpool or a crosswalk where, there's a lot of members of a team that helps put these artists together and in a safe space, and feeling comfortable with James, who obviously has done this so much and has great relationships with people, that it makes it easy for people to say yes now. Certainly easier for people to say yes now. So then the thing that's really exciting in those on some of those, and especially I think the carpools, are the quiet moments. So the
mm,
songs are great, but the chats in the car when there's no one else around and it feels really intimate, that's really exciting and fun to see. And that's when you're getting something out of a person who you don't see anywhere else. And that uniqueness is essential to any of these shows having long-term success. And that is also, I think, now how it feels in these first acts and in the monologues, where you want to know some real specific things about Cece's weekend, like you said, Ian's upcoming wedding,
There's
if
James'
Lauren went on it.
parents
Yeah, James's parents, who we all know
or
exactly.
your parents.
And now my parents, yeah.
Hang on,
Um,
let me get my folks. Hey, come on.
so all of that I think is you can't manufacture it, and it's so cool when it happens, and then when it happens once, you kind of want it to happen again, and so you just uh that is a bit of my philosophy in general on any of these shows, is allowing that space for creativity to happen, and not uh my boss always said, and I've tried to adhere to this, like sometimes the best note is no note.
Mm,
um, and so you feel sometimes when you're an exec uh, on this side that you're not doing your job if you're not coming up with some tweak or trying to
mm,
push creative into whatever your idea of funny is, or dramedy is, or whatever you're working on. Um, and sometimes it's just the giving the confidence to the person who's making it that that's good. What you're doing is good. Keep on doing that. Um, I think that that's
very similar role as a music producer, right? Same kind of
sure.
thing. And by the way, your sometimes no note is the right note is a beautiful analogy for a lot of music too.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's cool. And you leave room for happy accidents, which for me is another thing I do when I produce music is I want happy mistakes to be made where you go, "Oh, I would never have thought to do that, but now that we have," and then you can run with something that where did that come from? I don't know. It came from a complete goof. It came from we were messing around or sometimes it's I dropped a stick on a drum when we were recording, but did you hear how it bounced? Oh, hey, wait, what if we do, so
Yeah.
that leaving that space open and then leveraging it when you can that's very cool.
Yeah, I think that's really fun to be able to have that. And I think also the for me uh and in any of the shows that I work with, you know, building rapport is such a key part uh, of the process. Because once you have that relationship where they know that you like them, you like what they do, you are aware of what they've done, you know which writers put something together, which producers are responsible for which segments. You know the characters if it's some of the animated shows that I work with. You you're not just waltzing in with the note, having not seen or known anybody involved in the situation. So that when there is a conversation to be had about whether we're going in the right direction, or if we need to come up with something new, you're coming at it from a base of knowledge and trust within the organization, whether that's the show or the network. And I think for me, the way I try to treat that part of my job is, these are my ideas. I'm presenting them. Take what you want, take none if you want. I'm only doing this to help you. I try not to have any ego in it, because no one's going to know if it was my idea or my suggestion. That's
You
not
never
an
seem like you
part.
have a dog in the fight, and I'm sure you do somewhere, but you never seem like you do.
Yeah.
That's the thing you do the best, man. You never seem like this is personal. We're just trying to get to the best answer. You know,
That's the hope. That is,
you
I mean,
seem
I'd say,
truly interested in the best answer, even if you had nothing to do with where it came from. And that egoless kind of thing is so hard to find. I mean, everybody in theater and music and everybody is always blaming higher ups for their limitations or the things they can't do or the things they're not allowed to do. And here you are, willing to be not only the face of that all the time. Here, I'll hang out with you guys on the set. I'm here with you guys
yeah.
in this trench, so to speak, fighting it out with you. So yeah, when you come up with a suggestion, it's totally different than if it comes from a note.
That's the hope. That's the hope. And I think the nice thing about, look, it's crazy, but we're about to hit 7 years since the debut of the Late Late Show, and I mean that is a lot of time. Like, late night shows have now, historically, the ones I've worked on at least, lived for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years on air. But 7 years is a very long time, and we've all been together through this like crazy last few years as well.
1,000 some shows now, right? You
Yeah,
crossed the 1,000
yeah,
mark.
we crossed 1,000. It started in this like real joyous, sunshine every day state, and then from 2016 on, it was a little more fraught with just more tension, and we've found a way to sort of be a release valve, I think, for each other, and sometimes I think for just viewers looking for a laugh.
Absolutely.
And so I think we all really are proud of that involvement. And I'm certainly at a point now where I appreciate every day there now. I really appreciate all the time that we get to spend together making the show.
That appreciation thing I had written down again.
It's it's just it feels like it's a special group of people, and it's a special show to be a part of.
Well, you clearly have, and as I said, I've watched some podcasts and things you've talked about, and you've clearly got this appreciation for Hollywood lineages and long-term franchises and the arc of that sort of thing. And now you're the curator of that kind of stuff. You must be so proud of going from loving this stuff to now I get to take care of it and nurture it and grow it.
Yeah, there's a lot of pride in that. There's just not a lot of us who have gotten to have jobs like this and be involved in this many shows. And I do think that a lot of that comes from Rick Ludwin, who was the steward of this, and the guy who,
rest in peace, Rick.
Yeah, I mean, he really did. He didn't work on every single Tonight Show, but he worked with every single Tonight Show host on something.
And he was your mentor, right? I mean, he really kind of
Yeah.
was the guy that it seems like you got a lot of work ethic from. I think, didn't he used to watch all the shows and stuff?
Yep. Yeah, he watched everything. He watched every episode all the time. He never really took vacations. He always backed the right fight and stood up for the things he believed in. But he was a mild-mannered guy and had a great sense of humor. But he looked like your high school history teacher. And
Well, you used to be fair. So
yeah, I did too.
or a science
Um,
teacher. I'm gonna say chemistry.
okay. Um, and yeah, I think all of I I think that him knowing so much about late night informed so much about how he did his job. And he also came from a lot of those shows as a fan first,
Mm.
before he worked on them. And I think, you know, that type of appreciation for the form is really special and unique. And um, I didn't necessarily realize that that's what I was doing as well, but I certainly do now. That I have a lot of, I have an enormous amount of respect for the genre and the people who make these shows. And
Wait,
um,
that was another one. Respectful. Man, you just keep checking them off, don't you?
so yeah, I just think that in general, yeah, continuing to be a part of it, it means a great deal to me.
And it's obvious that it does. And I'm sure that that keeps people wanting to work with you on both sides because it does seem like you really enjoy it. You're really into it for the art and the end result of it. I mean, you seem like the kind of guy that would do anything for the right laugh, for the bit, you know, and you know, that's as a lover of comedy, that's the thing. You know, you
Yeah.
got to be willing to commit for the bit. And well, you've put on the jockey outfit, dude. I mean, you've gone all the way. You went
Yeah.
up what 10 feet in a chair. I mean, you're willing
Yeah.
to do, and that's very, very cool. That's to be admired once again. And I'm sure everybody appreciates that because there's a lot of mucky mucks that would never do that. So that's very cool.
Yeah, they all get a kick out of it. I more or less get a kick out of it too. Um, and I can take that step away to be like, if I was just watching this, I'd think this was pretty funny. So now I just have to be in it and enjoy the ride.
But you're such
And
a good about it. That's the nice thing is that we know you're not going to get all bent out of shape or, upset. You're just going to take it and like, okay, fine. But
yeah.
but it's willingness to do it. It's that reluctant start thing, man. I tell you, when you're ready for me to write your book, all right, I'm working on one for some other people right now. But seriously, when you're ready for me to write your book, I want to call it Reluctant Star. And,
Wow.
and seriously, I mean, in all honesty, you've got a story that could be told. So if you seriously ever want to do that, let me know because man, oh man, you've got. I can't imagine how many stories from backstages that you've got over the years. There's so many.
Yeah.
Geez, just working for Conan would give you enough for 5 books.
Yeah, there a lot has happened
Yeah,
that I've been around
yeah.
for sure.
So let me drag it back to bands for a minute and music. When a band, let's say the Parcels or the Linda Lindas, when they get booked, and it's they're going to be on that week. What does their week look like? Does anything happen prior to the day that they're going to show up? I mean, are there rehearsals? Are there contacts? Or are they just showing up on that day and diving in? Is it a long day? Is it a short day? Just the
Yeah,
logistics of it from a band standpoint.
there are a lot of conversations that happen in advance of the band being on, and most of that conversation happens once the band is booked. Then it's Josie, who I've mentioned a couple of times, who talks through with the band what they're trying to do, how much it's going to cost to do that, what we're able to do. Um, More often than not, the all of the setup for the band performance and the rehearsal for the band is happening the day of. So their day
Okay.
starts on the early side, and they have to be around and present for longer than, say, a talk guest, certainly much longer than a talk guest. Sometimes the band might get there before several members of the staff gets there so that they can do their sound check, do their camera check, and then they have like a 4 hour window or so once they're done with that, where they just have to wait. Because more often than not, they're also the final uh, portion of our tape day. So the actual performance, it's normally act 5 or act 6 of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a 6 act show. So we almost always tape the show in order. So if we're taping at 4, chances are the band is going to tape their performance closer to 5:15, 5:30. They'll have been there starting at 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning, oftentimes, or at least members of the band.
Wow.
um, if there is something a little bit more even beyond an in-studio performance. If it's something like we've had a handful of artists that did outdoor concerts for us in our lot. That's like a multi-day setup. Oops, sorry. It's a multi-day setup where we would be we, not being me, but the show, figuring out how much it costs, what they can afford to do. It's an entire build. It's bringing the cameras out. It's figuring out the lighting for the day when it's outside and hitting that twilight time sometimes so they can get a specific look. So knowing when the sun is setting. It's if we're going to do an outdoor type of concert, chances are we're doing multiple songs so that we can maximize the use of that stage. So we might shoot 2 or 3 songs, maybe 4 songs in a day, and spread them out over the course of the week. If it was something like that, just because from a cost standpoint and a efficiency standpoint, that's the only way that a 12:30 show can do that. And any of the like bigger performers also do have ideas of how they want to use the studio as well, because one of the things that's really cool about the Late Late Show studio is Ben, again, in his wisdom, and Rob, they wanted to create a look that was 360 degrees. So there's not a part of the studio that isn't camera ready. And so you might have a BTS, for example, where there are 8 members of the band or 7 members of the band, and they're all coming from different entrances, and we can shoot all those entrances and they all look cool because they're all ready for camera, where they then come out on a platform that we've created. Maybe we've turned the studio around or turned the cameras around so that we're shooting towards the audience as opposed to shooting towards where we normally have our guest bands situated. So quite a lot goes into it. And everyone is a little bit unique, which also makes quite a lot go into it. So it's not just sort of like a standing space. And I mean, it's one of the reasons why they all look so good is because so much time goes into creating that atmosphere.
So I noticed it wasn't that long ago that you guys flipped sides on things, right? The band used to be on one side and now it's on the other. Ian used to be on one side. Why the change? Just to have a change, or was there a specific reason?
It actually changed when we went back into the studio. So it was changed for COVID reasons, compliance reasons. Before we brought an audience back, we had to create enough space for camera ops to be safely distanced from each other, for James to be safely distanced, to have enough space in between where any of the staff was sitting. And so that's when where James's desk was during that time, the pre-audience time, that was where the audience is now. And
okay.
we were literally flipped. So the band is in the same place.
I see, the band's in the same place. We just flipped the direction of the
Yeah.
characters.
So even originally the place that I was sitting when it wasn't the bar moved also to a different spot and now than it was before. But where I sat in the post bar time is actually where the guest band performs now. So it was it was a much different setup, and it was cozy. It was cozy in that like it's not a very big studio. We were all still fairly separated from each other, but I could see everyone. I knew where everyone was, and I always had like a direct eye line to James. So for better or worse, he always knew where to find me. And then now this is back to the essentially the original look of the show. So the big difference is where I sit now and where most of the staff sits and where Rob is. We used to have a floor seating for more audience. So we probably have about a third of the audience now that we did pre-pandemic. and we fill in that some of that space. So maybe there's half of the total audience when you include us in the mix.
So originally
Um,
like 150 maybe?
yeah,
Okay.
maybe 180 was like in that space. And now it's closer to 50 or 55.
Us musicians are good at counting heads, man. You know, say, oh, how
Uh,
much are we making
you can
tonight?
see.
About 127 people. Okay.
Yeah. And then the place where I mean, this is really getting into the weeds, but where Ian sits now, we used to have that's where we used to have our bar. So that was a
Okay.
sponsored bar for a long time. Um, and then this is so weird. That bar kind of flipped. Now that bar is in part of the studio audience space. Um, so
And not many
um,
shows have a bar. I mean, you should be credited
that's
for
right.
having a bar, you know. When you were up at the highest point in the chair, I noticed you were finally by those glasses that nobody could ever reach. And I'm like, why isn't he just, you know, pop,
That's right.
you know,
It
I
was too
mean, you're
much. I
right
was
there.
holding on for dear life
I was
most
gonna
of the
say,
time.
but wait, he's 10 feet up. Maybe he doesn't want to fall. How stable did they actually have you? Because
Yeah.
you were doing a good job, but I'm like, you know, Nick squirms all the time, but it's usually from uncomfortable questions, not because he's
Yeah.
scared of falling. So
That was yeah, that they might have in retrospect taken a little more time to secure the space that I was at. Um but uh but I'm just fortunate that nobody
they had
fell,
faith.
nobody.
They had faith. Nothing's going to happen to
That's
him. He's
right.
too
Yeah.
smart. Nothing will happen.
Day 3 was scarier than day 4. Day 4 they figured it out, but day 3 I was like, this doesn't seem
Day
this
four, you could see a big platform, right, raised up
yeah,
above
yeah.
the bar. So, have I watched your show too many times? Holy cow! It's really, but yeah,
I
but,
no, it's
but I,
appreciated. It's all
we
appreciated.
couldn't tell when the bottom of the chair was low. I'm like, man, I hope we got a decent base on that because, I mean, not that it won't be exciting when he falls. I mean, they'll make
That's right.
something of that too, but it doesn't
Yeah, no
seem
kidding.
right. And I think basically their biggest enjoyment is watching you squirm because you squirm so well. You know,
Yes.
you
Thank
like
you.
just you do it in a likable way, a very like you're just a likable person. I mean, clearly you're just a very
Thank you.
likable
Yeah.
person. You know.
I think it's really, I mean, one of the other nice benefits of everything that's happened to me personally is uh the handful of interactions I've had, almost all online with fans of the show have all been really, really good and really cool. And um, they they enjoy watching all of us just being ourselves. And I think maybe some of that is, you know, for a lot of people still, it's hard to get together with your friends. And we have the uh luxury of being able to do that every day and showing what really is like a fun friends hanging out and having fun, sometimes at each other's expense, but always with the best of intentions. And I think that
It comes through.
I think there's something, yeah, there's something to that.
It does. I mean, that's one of the great strengths James has is this like The Rock comes on or Tom Cruise comes on or somebody, and you know these are the untouchable people, right? That are so far above
Yeah,
us mere mortals, and he just interfaces with them just like friends, and you get to see a
really does.
side of them that they don't normally get to show either,
That's
and
right.
and that makes you love them all the more. I mean, when you see, I would just watch recently the Tom Cruise parachuting, right, with James, and you know I would never do that. But then my wife goes, yeah, but if Tom Cruise was sitting there patting you on the back, going, "Come on, man, we can do it," with that big Tom Cruise smile, you jump out of the plane. I'm like, yeah, I probably would. And it's that you get to see that side of somebody like that. That's that's one of the best things about the show. Not everybody is able to do that. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
Colbert does that occasionally, but not to the level. Corden just does it immediately. He's just like, ah, we're friends. Okay.
Yeah, he knows how to make fast friends. It's really
He
cool.
really does. He's very cool about that. So tell me real quick. I don't want to keep you too much longer. You've been so nice to spend the time with us, but I
Yeah.
do want to ask you about the house band situation because I'd be
Yeah.
remiss if I didn't. So tell me what their job is like.
Um, they you know, they have a great gig. They are essential to the show. They are, I think, especially over the same period of time that we've been talking about, you've gotten to know every single one of them personally in a way that I don't think has ever been showcased on any of these
No,
shows
no other
before.
house band I can think of it. You've ever met more than two guys in the band.
They are all just consummate musicians. And they enjoy each other's company. They know each other really well. They give Reggie the space to do anything he wants, but Reggie's both like that unbelievably rare combination of incredibly talented musician and hilarious comedian. And so whichever way he wants to go during a song, he can do that, and they can play with them as well. And then you can see how funny everybody is in the band also. They all have a really good sense of humor. We all at certain points are shocked by how much we've shared of ourselves on
Yeah,
the show.
Guillermo's sex life is really just such a topic these days.
And it's and the yeah, I think they've all just really enjoyed it, and they get to create original songs that we play as bumpers. They always play this. Doesn't always the entirety of the song doesn't always get played on television, but they always play out with like a 3 or 4 minute song at the end of the show.
I always wondered if they continued out and finished. Interesting.
And yeah, I mean, and if you need the band to come up with a song for a comedy bit, like they are game to do it and can figure that out. And yeah, they're just there's a great sense of camaraderie amongst them, and I think that the way our show works, it also allows for them to do projects outside of the show as well. And so, I know Guillermo and Hagar, like you see them playing on other people's songs every once in a while, or sometimes they'll play in the band with one of the performers. I think Guillermo played on Tolliver's song when he was a guest on the show. And that's not the only time. And, like this has happened. Conan's band had a lot of similar characters, and Jimmy Vivino, who's great and comes up with, I don't know, he must have 100,000 original songs in his repertoire. It's incredible. He can he helped us on
I think he just was all of them.
he helped us on the Pete Holmes show also, where he created bumpers for us. He created our theme song, and we went through any number of iterations, and he was just like, you give him a half hour, he comes up with something new. It's remarkable. And so it's always fun to see those guys when they come through, sometimes with another band. And yeah, I like being I think being in a house band is it's got to be one of the great gigs.
Well, especially that one, because speaking of Colbert, we look at his house band with Jean Baptiste, and great band, spectacular band all the way around. Although we still want to know what happened to the cowboy drummer there for a couple of weeks.
He's back.
Yeah, I know he's back now. I saw the pedal board when the guitar player went to play drums, and since I do both, I'm like, oh man, that's cool. He does both. I saw he left his pedal board there. I'm like, oh, he's coming back. It'll be okay. But none of those bands that I can think of could have dropped a salad and it becomes a bit and it's okay. Or my bass amp is just turned off and now I don't have bass, and we just stop and we just talk about that, and that's okay. I mean, I've never played a gig where you could just go, well, yeah, we just dropped something, so we're going to clean this up. In the meantime, we'll just talk to you. You guys are okay with that, right? All right. I mean, you're always so concerned with that, suspension of disbelief on the band front. Oh no, we have to keep this, above your normal hoi polloi. But no, you guys are willing to just like, that's cool. We're people. It happened, and it's like,
for sure.
Like they're playing in your living room, which from our standpoint they are, but it's like they're playing in a living room environment, and they're just cool with whatever happens, and they're totally professional. They'll pick it up in a second, but meanwhile, we got to clean up the salad.
Yeah.
That just doesn't happen in a band environment. In real bands, real live touring bands, as opposed to a house band, it just doesn't. So that's, as a musician, that's one of the things we're like, oh, that's very cool. They're just, freedom
I agree.
To create a new news segment every time. He could just create a new one and have fun with it. And if he wants to go for an extra 2 minutes, the rest of the band's just going to let him. And that's cool.
Well, that is, I mean, nothing encapsulates that moment more than Steve's news intro, which came from, just a completely organic place and has evolved.
James giving him a hard time, essentially, right? Just like, what was that?
And it has now evolved into, I don't know if we put it online. Adam Abramson and the digital team created 2 different super sizzles of the evolution of Steve's news jingle. And I was encouraging them to do the second one because he'd done so many and so many funny ones since we'd put out the first one. And people's reactions to that are so much fun to watch. And him getting plaudits.
He was up there conducting the
yeah, exactly. That was just a blast. He had so it's easy to forget sometimes because he's done so many funny ones. So watching that sizzle, even for me, was a blast. Just to look back at some of those moments.
Well, I like where you could tell sometimes he's really under some pressure here to come up with something. You could see it.
He's like, to think of something.
Oh, I gotta make this. And once again, being a musician, it's like, oh, I've been there. I know what that's like. Oh, I've not been there.
How many different news jingles are there? The whole point of a news jingle is it's the same every time. So that's one of the joys of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's what America waits for, the news.
That's right. Exactly. I'm so sorry. I have to go pick up my kids very shortly. So
no, that's okay. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. And we were just so fortunate to have you and share part of your famous existence, even though it's a little non-committal how famous you want to get about all this. But
yeah. Well, I appreciate you reaching out, and it's been really fun to talk. And thanks for watching the show. And I hope you don't see me in too many compromising positions going forward.
Well, thanks. And let me know if you want to take me up on those music lessons.
Thanks. Yeah, I had a great time. Thank you.
For Nick Bernstein, I am Jet Stone, and thanks for coming to Gear and Gigs. We'll see you next time.
So glad you could all join us for another episode of Gear and Gigs. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. And don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course, YouTube. Until next time.